Hello, welcome to the Esoteric Software stream. My name is Erika and today we will be doing a lesson about the meshes basics. So, an introduction to meshes. If you're new to Spine and you're wondering how meshes work, then this is the stream for you. I will share with you the folder with all the material which I'll link in the description of the video if you're watching a recording. When I move these, everything seems a bit 3D. And how is that accomplished, you may wonder? That is the power of meshes in combination with bones, which is like one of the core concepts of using Spine, one of those that can become the most advanced aspects of Spine. You may already know that any image that we add to Spine, well, it gets turned into an attachment, which is inside a slot. Okay, this is a slot, these are all slots, and the inside is an attachment. And these attachments cannot actually, we can rotate them, yeah. We're meant to actually manipulate them using bones. Create bones. And like this, we can have a branch, but the branch is kind of like not deforming, right? What happens if we want this branch, for example, to be able to bend? We may want to create two bones instead, maybe one like this and one like this. The problem is that one branch is moving, the other one is not being followed by the image. Can we get an image that is like a single piece, like in this case, to follow two different bones? The answer is yes, with the usage of meshes. The easiest one to show you meshes on is the cake. For these I prepared some strawberries. So at first, let's discover how to create a mesh from an image. And that is accomplished like this. We go and find the image, which can be any image that we have in here, which inside Spine is called an attachment at the moment. And we're going to click on it, and then we're going to check inside the properties in the tree, down here, the mesh checkbox. So I'll start with this because this is a nice block, and we'll check mesh here. Okay, what happens is that while before we had this sort of corners, now the corners have these little dots, which we call vertices. The vertices are actually what is going to deform our mesh, so placing them strategically is going to determine how we can deform our mesh. But these vertices, if we go in edit mesh mode, are actually connected through triangles. Okay, let me dim this so you can see it better. There's two triangles here. This is very important because if I exit edit mesh mode and I try to translate one of the vertices, okay, like this, what do you see? It is distorting only half of our mesh. Here, it only distorts the other half. Here, it only distorts our mesh like this, and you can kind of see where the triangle is hitting. What does this teach us? That the triangles are actually fundamental into getting a good deformation of our mesh. So we have this basic mesh, and it is important to place our vertices nicely. But how do we do that? You learn that it is very important to know what you want your mesh to be able to do, because depending on what we want our mesh to do, we will change the mesh structure and also where we place our bones. We can already work with this mesh. This could be a mesh that is already done. If, for example, we decided to have three bones, a bone that anchors the cake in place, and two bones here that distort the cake. Let's try to do that. So this, in the taxonomy of meshes, is the first kind of mesh, a simple mesh, a mesh that we did not edit. We just checked mesh, and that's it, that's done. And it's the first example that we're going to be working on. Once again, what did I do? I selected the cake, I turned this into a mesh by checking the mesh checkbox, and now I'm going to create bones so that I can distort the mesh. I'll select the create tool while I'm in setup mode. That is very important. Then I will hold the control, which is Command on Mac, to select the cake. Then I will release control, and the cake should be outlined. Now I can click, and that creates my first bone. I call this a holder bone because it holds the entirety of the project for me, so I can have it a bit organized. Okay, next, I will create two bones, one on each side, so that I can control this cake and distort it a little bit. One child bone here, then I will reselect cake, and I will create a second child bone in the other corner. If we go in animate mode, and we try to move these, okay, you'll see that nothing at the moment happens. That is because while we have the mesh and we have the bones that are supposed to control it, we need to do one more step, which is to bind this mesh so it follows the bones. Let's go back to setup. To do that, we need to open the weights panel, which is in views, weights, which sometimes also automatically opens when we click on the weights tool here. Let me expand that. This is the heart of controlling your meshes. First, make sure that the mesh is selected while in setup mode. Being in setup is very important, because if we do the same thing in animate mode, then we'll kind of wreck our mesh pose. I'll get back to explain this once again later, but for now, just make sure to be in setup if you're beginning. Let's click on bind. We're going to bind these 3 bones to the mesh. 1, 2, and 3. Once we are done, we press bind once again. Usually Spine does a very good job at automatically weighting these meshes for us. Sometimes we have to adjust them a little bit. Let's test this out now. If I move this bone, now the entirety of the cake moves with it. Very good. Then I can move this bone and the cake follows and deforms, and this other bone and the cake follows and deforms. Now, if I don't want the base to also deform, or maybe my bones were outside of the cake, and so we see that the cake is not following, we need to adjust the weights. We can do so from animate mode actually, and it's safe to do so. And we open the weights tool once again. It's important that we have the weights tool open, because when the weights tool is active, it lets us see the pies in a colored version. So we can tell better which weights are influencing our mesh. So which bones have an influence on our vertices. So if I select this vertex, I can tell that 100% of the bone cake 2 is influencing this vertex. For this other vertex, 100% of cake 3 is influencing this vertex. Here we see that we have a mixture of weights. We can change these if we select, for example, direct mode, which I prefer. You may have add on, which gives you a sort of brush, but in this case I will mostly show you things using the direct tool, so please switch to that if you're following along. We said that we don't want the base to move when we move these bones here, so to accomplish that we have to select a vertex, such as this one, then choose the bone that we want to change the influence for, and then we can use the slider and bring this cake to 100%, the cake bone. We're gonna do the same on the other one, 100%. And now let's test it out. Press the spacebar to deselect, so that it's easier to select the bones, and as you see, the cake is deforming properly. Now I will show you a more advanced step, always using the simple meshes for now. Then we'll move on to a different kind of mesh. Let's say that we want these things that I placed on top to move with the cake, together with the cake. And let's make copies of these. So we have the strawberry. It's me actually first reparent them all to the cake, so they are easier to find and they follow along correctly. And I'm going to have maybe 3 copies of each. So I'll press this twice. Okay, and then I'll move maybe these here. I'll delete some of the copies. So if I go here and maybe make a testing animation, which I always recommend you to do not move your mesh in setup mode, because you may accidentally leave it very close to where it is, but it's not actually in the same spot, getting your mesh to actually move a little bit when you change the weights in setup, which is very bad practice. See here? And this is how you wreck very easily a mesh. So let's never do that. And instead, whenever you want to test your mesh, you switch to animate mode and we create a testing animation. Okay, let's say that we want to make some easy movement. Like first it does this, then on frame 60 we key the same position so it loops, then in the middle I make it move like this, and then I simply, I don't know, get it to do this, so it's moving. Wow, it's a horrible animation, I know, but we're just testing. Your tests are gonna be ugly, that's okay. Let's go back here. Okay, we want the cake pieces actually to follow the cake, and that's the difficulty that we're testing for. How do we get them to do this? Well, we can turn them into meshes as well. They will be simple meshes, so we simply have to select them all, like this. I'm holding Control, which is Command on Mac, to select them one by one while I click on them. And then, for each of these, you can just click all at once, Mesh, to turn them into meshes. Now they are meshes, we can bind them to the same bones that we want them to be influenced by. In this case, we want them to be influenced by just this bone in the corner and the other bone in the corner. Okay, let's bind them. First I'll pick this, and then I'll pick the other side. Then I'll press bind again. So see how, because I had them all selected, I was able to bind them all at once. So now if I deselect or just select one of them, each of these effectively got weighted to these two bones. Now if I go to animate mode, okay, as I imagined, they got some automatic weights. They're kind of following just one bone and the other bone for the mesh, the only mesh that overlaps with it. Here we are, we have all of the little simple meshes. If you don't see the pies like me in this moment, it's because you have to go and select the weights tool. Then it will show you the little pies over the vertices. If I select a simple mesh like this, and then I select a vertex, while I'm in animate mode with this ugly testing animation, when I change the weight of one vertex, it starts distorting my mesh like this. We're going to be using this to place each of these items on top of the cake so that it will move and stay in place, follow the distortion of the cake. We can select all 4 vertices at the same time, and then we can use the slider here and figure out what is a good placement. This, for example, could be it. If we are back in setup, we can tell that this mesh here is more or less in the middle. Now, this we're going to see here, and it's the very basic to be able to do the 3D stuff afterwards. So if we have an item that is perfectly in between 2 bones and we want it to stay in between 2 bones, what would be the weight that you would assign? You can write your guesses. 50-50, I have another 50%, very good, thank you. Let's try this out. As rightfully guessed, whenever we have something that we want precisely in between 2 bones, that it is placed in between 2 bones, we'll need to assign equally 50 and 50 so it stays in between the 2 bones. Let's play the ugly animation. Ah, beautiful! It stays in the middle. When something is closer to one bone, it should have more influence of that bone rather than the other, because otherwise it will move in a wrong way like this strawberry. So we can use the sliders. Okay, I think this is fine. I also like to pause at some point where it's more evident. Okay, and then maybe place this here. This slider is your friend because it is so. If you have a testing animation and you just move things around, then it's easier to tell if you place things correctly. Okay, I love to also do this because it makes it all the more evident. Okay, so if I raise this and test it in weird positions, then I'll be able to tell immediately which weight is wrong. So now if I select this, I want it to stay on the cake. And so I know that this is the right weight because it's now touching the cake. This, okay, I'll get it to touch the cake. This, I think that I need, okay, to place it more like this. And maybe this one. Okay, now let's test this out. Beautiful. And like this, you just learned how to weight a simple mesh and how to use these simple meshes to place something so that one bone controls multiple images at the same time. This can be used to create a chain or also a parallax effect. You made me laugh, Team Merlo, with the clap, clap, clap. But good job! Let's ramp up now the difficulty. If you delete the keyframes, will that revert the mesh and attachments to the default position inside my animation? Yes. But actually, you'll know that the weights stay. Okay, so see? Now they are back to be the same as what we had in setup, which is exactly the reason why we test this in animate mode, because we're not damaging our skeleton, our rig, but it is pristine in setup. And we can test it out in animate mode. We can create another ugly animation if we want. Yay! And it follows along. If you're not familiar with that project, it's because it's very new. And here it is. What happens here is that we have this flower, and you see that the flower deforms with the stem. Okay, it does this sort of movement. Let's see it without bones. It's so squishy. I love it. Okay, we're going to see how to rig something similar to the stem that we see here. Let's go back to our project, meshes examples. For these, I reconstruct the flower, images, and the cloud pot, leaf, petals, maybe also the pot base, and I need the stem parts. Okay, there they are. So I imported these images. I'm going to place these ones here, and then I'll create the flower on top here. So we have seen that we can do already lots simply by turning an image into a mesh, then we kind of wait it, and already we get some results. But as we stated before, maybe we want the mesh to be able to follow the bones and distort a little bit better. So the second kind of mesh that I'm going to show you is what I call a tubular mesh, because it looks like a tube, like a pipe, okay? It's this thing, it's a rectangle. How do we create the mesh for something like this? Super simple. We find the image that we want to turn into a mesh, cloud pot stem, and we check mesh and then go in edit mesh. Alright, this created a mesh for us. If I were to distort this, okay, I would get this. It's modern art, we could say. Let's go back. Let's actually make something useful with this. We said that we may want to have the stem bend, so it's like soft and squishy, and to achieve that, what we need is to slice a mesh with many horizontal slices. So the second kind of mesh that is very simple is a mesh that has horizontal slices so that it can bend laterally like this. If these horizontal slices are distributed along the whole side, along the whole, for example, height of a mesh, then we'll be able to bend this laterally along the entirety of the height of a mesh, which is what we're going to see here. To enter that state, we have to, after selecting the mesh checkbox, click on edit mesh. Then there's the generate button. Now this button here is very useful because whenever you click it, it subdivides your mesh into two. But you can also only use it when you have a mesh that is a rectangle or a square. If I try to use generate, this is not good. I will generate a couple more. Okay, whenever we press this generate button, it adds the vertices and it tells us the count of vertices down here. So we know that we have 12 vertices at the moment. Let me subdivide this a little bit more. Depending on the size of your object in game, you may decide to add more vertices or take out some. So for example, if this is the size of your pot, you could stop here, or even before, you don't need as many vertices because they are not gonna be seen in game. If this pot is the protagonist, the star, the prima donna, and needs to be zoomed in a lot, then this pot is allowed to have more vertices and we can generate more. I, however, would use less vertices at first and then add more. But first, let's start simple. We have the stem and we're going to stop at around 18 subdivisions. We'll start simple. You could have like 4 bones for these. We'll use 2 because we're beginning with this, and you'll see that you can achieve a lot even with just 2 bones. I am in setup mode. I select the create tool. I need to select the parent bone, and that parent bone is going to be the root, of course. I hold Control, which is Command on Mac, to select the image, release Control, and then click and drag to create my bone. If I want to have more control over these, or be very precise, it's actually convenient to do these very precise at first. So I'm going to enable compensation of bones and images, and then set the rotation to precisely 90 degrees so as to make it as easy as possible for me in this stage. I'm going to center it. Okay, so it more or less ends where the art ends, and then I'll disable bones and images so that it's not affecting my bones continuously. I want to split these into 2 nested bones. I'm not gonna choose the rest, and click OK. With the mesh selected, I'm going to click bind while I'm in setup mode always. Press bind and I'll select the 2 bones. Alright, then I'll click bind again. Usually this is the thing that Spine does best because it should have already created something that is more or less usable. Let's see. Okay. It created a sort of rigid mesh. I can tell because these are all 100%. So I'll create a testing animation for these. At first, I select the 2 bones like this. Then I will rotate them at first in one direction. Ah, the flower is detached. Then I'll go to frame 60, key the rotation. Go to frame 30, rotate in the opposite direction. Then I'll box select all of the keys here and apply curves. So it does this. Because it rotates at the same time, it is not very interesting. So I'm going to offset the second child here, and using the offset tool by like half of the previous one, so it looks like it's waving hello at us. Okay, petal, 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 base. Okay, the stem and parent them all here. Let's see. Okay, connected it all. So as you can tell from this testing animation, we have a sort of a rigid situation, which I actually wanted to explain on our branch friend here, who is smiling at us. We want the bending to happen along the entirety of the length of these. Now, if while the animation is playing you press Ctrl, Command Mac, the animation will pause, which is awfully convenient. I'm going to box select all of the vertices except the extremes. Now, I know that I always say this, and then people will, in any case, select the parts that they are not supposed to select. If you do that, the flower will detach from the stem at some point. We use a different button, the smooth button. What it does is it averages the weights that we have here, that we have already assigned automatically, and it creates a smoother sort of bending. Okay, if I were to make, for example, the bending here a bit more extreme, and then maybe here more extreme like this, a nice smooth way of bending this, we don't need many bones to achieve this. What we need is maybe more vertices instead. And actually, I have a demonstration of this concept. So I'm going to duplicate this stem, and I'm going to bring it outside because I'm going to do a demonstration with this. I will have 4 versions of these, so we can compare using more bones, using more vertices, or using less bones, less vertices in all the combinations. Okay, so here we have a denser mesh. Here, for this one, we're gonna have half of that, and also half of that here, so they are the same. 16. On this side, I'm going to split these bones into 2 nested bones, or maybe 3. Let's do 3. On this side, I'm gonna do what usually people do, which is, I don't know, 9, okay, which sometimes I see. Now let's weight these and see the various combinations and what they do. Just gonna smooth this a couple of times. When we are in an extreme position, I mean, yeah, you can tell more or less where do you have more bones or less bones. And we can see that where we have more vertices, it adheres very nicely, very well. This is like the prima donna situation. It is on screen, it takes the space on screen, it wants that space. And so it's like this in matrix view. In terms of metrics, this mesh here, this mesh for sure is the heaviest because it has 200 vertex transforms, whereas this one has 40. So it is a lot lighter in terms of performance when you need to save up a little bit on performance. So if you're on mobile, creating stuff for mobile, or you need to have dozens of things done in Spine, you'd probably want to go with this setup here. Okay, so this is the extreme case. And we can compare them a little bit. Now let's instead rotate them, moving. So if you move them all at the same time, can you tell the difference between these while they are moving, if they are this big? Can you honestly tell which one has more bones, which one has more vertices or less vertices while they are moving? Yes or no? Nope. Right. Then let's see if we want to offset them, if we want to have like some sort of animation, which is gonna be easiest to animate. This that has less bones or this that has more bones? What do you think? Okay, you can also tell the difference. Good. Okay, let's say that we want to have some classic offset for these parts. With these, it's gonna be easy because I just do like this. Then I select this and I do this. Okay, so it's 2/3 and it's already done. With this one, okay, I have to go and offset a little bit each of these. So let's see, a little bit this, a little bit the second bone, okay, then a little bit the third bone. Okay, because I have more bones, I have more stuff that I need to be able to control. Let's pretend that I did them and they are identical. Which one was easier and which one was harder to animate? I think it's the one that has the most bones, because less bones means that it's easier to touch the map and animate them. Now, let's say that we need to hold a certain position for a certain amount of time. Which one looks better when it is in this position? Probably this one, but also if I wanted to, I could probably also get them to be similar if I offset this like this. When we have some extreme positions, then it becomes evident when we have less vertices rather than less bones. So more vertices are actually better than having more bones, unless you need to create some specific shape that can only be obtained when you have more bones. Okay, so you want to do this. And maybe here, I don't know, you do this. It's a tad harder when you have less bones, that is true. So you have to consider, will your character ever reach this pose that you have here or not? Because if you need to have a simple shape or a movement like this, then it makes sense to go for the simpler shape. If you need to have more control, you can always subdivide later. If you need to have some specific shapes, then the one that has the most bones and the most vertices definitely does it better. But remember that at any time you can go back here and add a few more bones to have more control in case. And so it's actually better to start with less bones if possible. So this was the big comparison. Okay, so now we're back here. We have our flower that just wants to do a cute bending sideways like this. Oh, look how peaceful. Okay, and this was our second kind of mesh. I could also go fancy and just, I don't know, rotate this here, rotate this like this, and then I could even weight these to follow the main stem. And if I have just two bones, then it's very easy to accomplish, because I just need to bind these to these two, then I turn this into a mesh, and I bind this to these other two. Then I go in animate mode, and I just change the weights. If I want one to be more influenced by that, unless I wanted to like have a pot holder, and then I could have had the base. I can actually do it now. So I have here the pot holder, then I also bind this to follow also the base. And then when I change the weights here so they are anchored on the ground, all I have to do, okay, is this, and it's anchored now to the ground. And the result is this. This was the simple mesh. This was the tubular mesh, the one that bends along the whole surface. Now we're going to see a subset of the second kind, which is the mesh that finally follows the shape of this. Third kind, we're going to do the kind of mesh that can bend, but this time in a more rigid manner, following closer the shape here. So let's turn this branch into a mesh. Let's edit the mesh. This time, we're going to finally touch the mesh. To create a mesh structure from here on, we usually will have two steps. Two steps. First, we create the outer border, and then we create the inner vertices. Usually I do it like this. Or also just the subdivisions in a second step. So, when we are in first phase, which by the way you can also do by tracing tin, yes. So you can do it like this, and then it's traced for you. And if you have a very geometrical shape, it's gonna work very nicely. But since this is a teaching moment, I'm not gonna use tracing, and instead I'm gonna be using new, so I can show you the logic behind and how to fix your traced meshes. Okay, we want to start from a corner, because wherever there's a corner, usually there will be a vertex. Any corner is fine. And we also want to keep things that will move together. So I can start from this corner, and then I will place a vertex close to each corner, like this. And I'm going to go reasonably close, except in case I'm cutting away part of the mesh, in which case I need to add one more vertex so the mesh is not cut. And then I'm gonna go up, go around it. As close as possible without touching the mesh is ideal. So I want the mesh to be able to bend like this. And I think that this is a mesh that we can start with. Probably I would add here another vertex so that these can bend a little bit better, because we've seen that if we have these parallel lines, it's gonna bend nicely thanks to the parallel lines. For this, I think I will also add maybe at least one more bone for this branch and one for this. I can just create one in the middle like this, which controls both. Then let's go here and I'll create a child that starts from here and rotates here. Okay, now let's bind these three to the various bones. Start from the bottom and we bound them all. The automatic weights should actually already be fine. Let's test this out. So as you see, I don't even have to change the weights basically, it's already working. So a good mesh structure will give you good results automatically. We just place these vertices where the next bones were starting. So here there was these, so if the bones are placed where the pivot are going to be also placed, so the rotational points, and we have the vertices placed in those same spots, we're going to get good results, and often automatically if the bones overlap. So if, for example, I want this to be more rigid and be controlled solely by this branch, maybe this too, because it's attached to that branch, I could change the weights, and then it would be, yeah, it would make it lose mass a little bit. Actually, if we want something to bend in a nice smooth way, we could also focus the bending, but only in specific places if we want it to be extra smooth. So for extra smoothness but rigid, we can add, for example, here more vertices. So we only focus the vertices where the bending is happening. I placed this a little bit too high. Rotate it a lot. Then I can change the weights for these so it follows completely this branch, or maybe very close. Okay, this branch, then this, and then it should be better. Now, because there's a mismatch in the position, it's not as good. I should actually fix the position of this bone. If you do such a mistake, you can enable bones and images compensation so that you can move these. Then let me check, and I'll get it to match better. Okay, if it even overlaps here where you had your bones here, okay, then you're gonna get better results. The only problem is that if you adjust the position of your bones, disable this, and then you try to change the weights, you will see something a bit ugly. Now the mesh moves in setup mode. We can see that it does not happen in other parts, it only happens with this bone that we moved. That is because whenever we bind a mesh to some bones, what we are doing is storing the position of these bones relatively to the mesh. So now it's stored within the mesh. So even if we move the bones, the mesh still remembers the original position of those bones. This can be a problem, but if we need to fix the position of the bones and then we want the mesh to remember this new position of the bones instead, it used to be called update bindings, now it's update. Update will update the position of the bones stored within the mesh. So now I press this, and now when I change the weights, it's not moving anymore because we updated the stored position within the mesh. I was trying to bend these to a certain extreme, so if I try to rotate this a lot, I can now adjust the weights so that you usually want the weights that touch the next bone to be very close, if not completely 100%, depends on how rigid you want something to be. Then here we usually have them until it does not break our mesh here. So if I raise it too much, it's not gonna look good. So probably something around here, because my mesh structure should have been, okay, this is a bad structure. Let's actually change it. The beauty of Spine is that we can always go back and manage again our structure. So a better structure for this would have parallel lines here, because parallel lines deform better. We have seen that when this was bent, it was not performing well. Now, if we move instead this, okay, closer, so it creates a sort of parallel line like this, then we'll see that this will help rotate. It will help when this is rotating to deform a bit better. So we could have it like this. What usually happens is that it looks very good on one side and it looks smoother, and then on the opposite side it creates this. So I know that it sounds counterintuitive, but I think that it actually will work better when we remove the vertices here. Before it was doing this, then we removed them, and now it actually bends a little bit better. We have seen that when we want something to be rigid, the key is to focus the rotation on where one bone ends and the next one starts, okay, and to have portions, entire portions of our mesh to be at 100%. So this is all 100% on one bone. Actually, this is 99. So okay, now it's 100%, and then we have the next section, okay, and all of these parts. Now, if we want to have a super clean mesh, we could remove these vertices. Let's say that we want to apply that bending concept here to our cake. So I will give the cake a twin. What happens if we decide that we want the cake to be able to bend laterally? Can we do that? How would you make the cake bend laterally based on the information of what we have done until now? And I just need one bone like this, maybe placed at 90 degrees, and then we parent these two bones here so they follow the rotation of that bone. The 100 meshes and bones. So with these already, we should be able to rotate a little bit of this cake like this. But it's kind of rotating not nicely because of that triangle situation that we were talking about earlier. So we have just two triangles. So we need to add a few more vertices to be able to have the cake bend. So we're going to slice the cake into the horizontal slices. We could even generate, never mind, I'm going to make them by hand. We can add more vertices by hand by using the create tool. So I may follow the lines that I added for myself here. 3 sections is usually the minimum to be able to bend something. Okay, I guess this is fine. We could start with 3. Okay, and then bind this also to the middle bone that I just added. So now if I get these to rotate, and now you can already simulate a little bit the rotation thanks to the 3 sections. So we just learned from this that the minimum to bend something is to add 1, 2, 3 sections. And it's gonna be very useful also when we're gonna be doing meshes that bend towards us or many other situations. So why do we start with less? Because then once the weights are applied, we can actually go back in and add more subdivisions like this if we realize that it's not smooth enough, and usually Spine will automatically average these for us, so it looks super smooth, but we didn't have to do the calculations ourselves. Spine does it for us, okay? And it works not just for these, it works also for more advanced meshes. So a good workflow is to start with less and add more, because Spine will do the automatic calculations for us. Let's say that I also want to have the face follow. I think I'll bind it to these 2 bones, maybe also these 2. And while it's like this, do you know that there's a new Spine feature? Welding. I want to transfer the weights that are here on this, so I can use weld, and then I pick this. Okay, and now I attached automatically the face. I welded it. Without me having to do this, it was automatically calculated perfectly. This was added yesterday. What happens if the mesh you pick is smaller than the one I need to weld? I'll make a copy of this pudding and I will attach it. I will weld it to the branch. Okay, then I bind it to the same bones, and then I weld it to this mesh. Did it work? Oh yeah, it is attached! Look at that! Okay, let's destroy the pudding. Now I'm going to show you meshes that are not meant to bend laterally, so not with a bone that bends them sideways, which is like the most basic thing that you can do with a bone, but meshes that are supposed to be translated instead. For this, I will start with the butterfly, that by the way also has a face, and then I will show you another example on this bird here. We're going to need, for the butterfly, to have a bone here that holds the butterfly body and also some other, the face, for sure. We want the face to be attached to the butterfly, and maybe also the antennas, the wing. The wing is going to be controlled with the same logic that I'm going to use for the bird. We can do it, I think, this way. Select the butterfly body. We are in setup mode. I select the wing, and then I place one bone here on the extreme. Alright, then I turn this into a mesh, and I'm just gonna have a duplicate of this. Then I'm going to mirror. Okay, for perfect mirroring, you can do this by setting the translation of the bone with a minus, and then setting the scale here to -1. So it's perfectly, or should be, perfectly reflected. I have my mesh. I'm going to bind it. I'm going to bind it to the body, and here I'm going to do the same to the other mesh. Does not matter that it's not precise. And bind it. Now in animate mode, I want this side to follow the butterfly body, and this side to follow the butterfly wing. Same here. So I'll show you what happens before adjusting them. So I'll key the translation for this, and then in the middle I get it to do this. Okay, so see, if it's not set to 100%, we'll get this to move a little bit, which I don't want. I want it to be precise. And here, like this, I can get the butterfly wing to actually compress. And so I need to have 100%. I'll get this one to also be very close like this. Then let me key the position, the translation, copy, paste. Now if it does it very slow, it's gonna be very lame. I could have also done this instead of with a bone. I could have just scaled the bone here and got the same effect. So if we want to make it fancy to kind of justify all of this hassle, I could have done maybe this. Then when it's coming back, it's doing this. Now very slowly, kind of looks lame. So I'm going to make it very fast, like this, like a butterfly wing, right? I'll just create a new animation, which I'll call butterfly, so that I don't have to repeat this a lot. Okay, and then I'm going to compress this. Okay, butterflies move the wings very fast, and like this, it looks a little bit better. Then, do I want to be fancier? Maybe I translate the body also a little bit. So it goes, I don't know, either up or down, I never remember. And then I offset it. Okay. Now, let's see the next example, which is a little birdie. Let's say that in this case, we want a bone to rotate and translate to get the movement of the bird. At first, we need a bone to control the entirety of the bird. Okay, so I'm going to make it start from here. For the wing, I'm just going to create a bone here. Yeah, that's gonna be it. Now let's create the structure of the mesh for this. We need the wing to bend in the middle, pretty much like an arm, right? Maybe I can generate it so it's at a half, yes. And I'm going to add 2 more vertices here. That's it. That's our mesh structure for this. Maybe I could bring this closer, but it's not even necessary. Then from here, I'm going to bind the wing to the body and to the wing. To animate a bird, I'm gonna create a new animation, call it bird. First translating up, then at 30 here, then at 15, it's gonna be down. It's not following for now. So I need to weight this. Okay, the weights are very simple also in this case. Basically, the part that is touching the wing is gonna be 100% controlled by the wing. For the principle that we need to have parts that are controlled by 100% by a bone, otherwise we're not using the full range of a bone. In the middle, they are equally distanced, so I'm gonna apply a nice 50% to these parts. And so we have the basic movement like this. Yeah, it's gonna work. And I'm gonna apply curves, maybe make it a tad faster. We're also gonna rotate it to create the wing flap. So let's find this bone. I'm going to key the rotation here and actually also here. And then I'm gonna rotate it. So first like this without the offset. So it does this. And then when it goes up, it rotates like this. And I feel like when it's here, it needs to go a little bit more forward. Yeah, it looks better. Okay, then you can have fun with that. Usually the last thing that is necessary to complete this is to also rotate, maybe translate the body so it looks a bit more natural. So you kind of have it do, I think, this, curves, and make all of these faster. They're sort of inverted. Okay, so they are not the same. And when they go down, it's better. When it goes up, actually from here, usually it's cool to also color the wings. So from here, yeah, from here needs to be white. Then it goes up. And here, I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be colored some color. Whatever, it's gonna be this color now. So you could also have like the wing part. Usually I replace the wing with a version of the wing that is a back version, so it looks better, but also like this, it's okay. Another way that this can be used, if instead of wanting a mesh to bend laterally, we want to translate it, or when it's cloth and you want something soft to be translated in the middle to be able to open and close, so that's the example that I have in mind, then in that case we change the mesh structure once again. So for this, I am going to create more vertices here in the middle. Maybe I'll keep a couple here so that it can sort of bend. Kind of destroys this though. So usually when you see that the triangles are getting deformed, the triangles determine how this will bend. So if I leave it this way, and then I get the animation here where the cake is distorting, you can see that this is distorted a little bit more. So it worsens the performance of this. When we want a mesh to be able to do lots of things, then we need to add lots of controls. Now in this case, I just want this part to be able to be translated and be up. So I think I'm gonna do maybe something like this. So I have a portion that can bend, and then these kinds of hold it in place. That's the idea. For this, I will add one more bone. What the yellow line does, it forces a geometry between the vertices, so that spine is not gonna automatically try to guess the triangles. I'm forcing the triangles that I want. I've seen it used a number of times, but not had a whole explanation of what's the function. So it has the function to force the geometry that you want, plus whenever there's one of these orange lines, you can have smoothing also travel along these lines. Smoothing won't work on vertices that are in the middle of a mesh, but if you connect these vertices with orange lines, then you'll get the average of those also on this internal edge, manual edge that we created. And that's what it is used for. It is also useful whenever you want to delete part of the mesh like this. Then it lets you do that, because if I just try to do this, I cannot delete this triangle. I need to add an orange vertex like this, and then it's possible to delete it. Here I'll create a bone that will be in charge of translating up and down here, like this. I'm going to bind this new bone, and I'm going to apply the weights so that if I want, I can get this bone to take up part of the cake, basically, to translate it up. So to do this, to weight this correctly, I will move at first this up. I'm also creating a testing animation for this. Okay, then from the up position, I will change the weights. The one that is going to be influenced the most, the two ones, are going to be these two vertices. And then I'm going to get the other vertices to also be slightly influenced. Then I can also get these ones until I get the shape that I want. Then I feel like I moved this a little bit too much, so I could have it this way. And as you see, like this, you can get something to also just be translated. This is what you'd mostly use for an eye, to open and close an eye. Actually, on a cake, it does not have the same effect. And once you realize that this is not smooth enough, you can add more subdivisions. Then you just play the animation and it's, yeah, basically done. Okay, here I could smooth it a little bit so it has more of a curve, and it's done. So it can be nice maybe to, instead of doing that, actually to maybe pretend that the cake is changing perspective. So with this, we actually, I think, covered the basics of the first kind of meshes, because then there's the 3D meshes. For the 3D meshes, the meshes that simulate depth, we actually did another Twitch stream a while back, which had the little gifts, and I explained how to do those on the snow globe okay, here there were several gifts that had several setups so that they could simulate the depth, and then we kept on increasing the difficulty on this. Those are just vertex animation deformation rather than anything controlled by the bones themselves? No. On this stream, we don't use direct deformations. I am kidding, of course, but there is some truth in what I'm saying, because direct deformations tend to ramp up CPU usage in your projects very quickly. So if we go back here and look at the metrics, what's the number of deformed vertices? 0! Okay, what is the number of vertices for this cake? It's actually 25, it's very good. The entirety of this project doesn't have many vertices, we did a good job. Brother Castiel is asking, what is a direct deformation? And it shall remain a mystery. I am kidding, I am going to show you so that you can avoid it. So this is totally biased. Erika hates direct deformations, you shall not use them. But why does Erika hate direct deformations with a passion? Here we have the metrics panel. To use a direct deformation, what you do is you select one of the vertices that you have here, and instead of using the carefully calibrated vertices that we did, you're doing this. Now this vertex has turned pink, which means that it was directly deformed. Now the number of directly deformed vertices is 4. Now we have a deform key. On something that has 4 vertices, this is not outrageous. But let's look at something that has way more vertices, like this. Okay, like this one here. Now this mesh has 32 vertices and actually 200 vertex transforms, because it's the heavier of the ones. Oh, I think this is gonna be a good comparison. Okay, this has 32 vertices and it has 200 vertex transforms. For example, this one vertex is influenced by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different bones. Terrible practice. Each vertex ideally should be influenced by no more than 4 vertices, ideally 3 or 2. Each number of bone that is influencing each vertex is stored within the mesh information. Its position is calculated according to not just one bone, but in this case all 9. Because this is 9, this counts as 9 vertex transforms. The total number of transforms that we have here, we said, is 200. Now I will move 1 vertex. Look at the number of deformed vertices. 200, exactly the number of vertex transforms for this mesh, because now every vertex in this mesh is being stored, so even if I move another one, you see that it stays 200. To make a looping animation, you need to have at least another key, so you'll key this here to store the current deformation, and maybe you'll move, I don't know. We have 600 deformed vertices. Now imagine if someone thought that they can just animate the whole mesh like this. Maybe you use the mesh tools, which are for creating mesh deformations. I forget that this panel exists. So what I do is, maybe I do this, maybe I create an animation like this. Some people, they first create an entire rig for a face, and then they use direct deformations to animate that face. Can you imagine? And so they end up with a bunch of these deformed vertices, but on much heavier meshes. Now look at this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keys, and we have 1,000 deformed vertices. If you start having problems with the performance of your game and you use direct deformations, it's because you are asking the device to calculate the real-time position of each of these vertices, not only compared to several bones, but also to several bones and the new pose that you gave them. So this is why direct deformation can become very heavy. This looks like something you could potentially use for a traditional animation smear effect. Yes, and sometimes people use it like that, and I actually would recommend it for that when you need something that is rather complex. But yes, if you're using it for regular animation of something that has many animations in game, so not just something quick that disappears like a smear effect, but something on a main character, then, my dear, you are in for a bad time. But is it bad only for games? Because I use Spine to make GIFs and not game assets. Well, if you're only animating GIFs, then it's okay, I guess, to use it. Just think though, do you want at some point to have your characters have entirely new assets in your GIFs? Some people, read Erika, me, like to have personalized stickers, and I sometimes do stickers for other people as well. So I have my own set of stickers, I did stickers for other people, and I did my animations. I have these as Telegram stickers, I have these as Discord stickers, and WhatsApp, etc. Now, we may use this also with different skins, so you have one for each of your friends. The problem is that if you directly deform something, like this hair, and this hair is animated with direct deformations, you cannot add a new skin and have it already animated. You have to reanimate that part for each of the new skins for each of the animations. You're never gonna finish that way. So it's not that convenient to do direct deformations if you want a project to be scalable. And I know what you'll think. Oh, but my character is never going to have other skins. Those are the famous last words, because it can happen and it will happen that you, at some point, someone will ask to create variations of your character. A tiny Christmas hat, a new t-shirt, some new assets of some other kinds, and then you have to reanimate all of these by hand, and you're gonna be like, no, this is not possible, I'm not gonna be doing all of this work. But if instead you had used bones, then you wouldn't have to suffer, because you just weight your mesh in, what, 5 seconds? And then you're able to already export an entire new set of animations reusing the animations that you already did. So which one is more convenient? Direct deformations, or weighting your meshes to bones and only using bones to create actually the animations? And that is why I usually avoid the direct deformations, because they are bad for performance and they are not scalable whenever you need to add more to your project, and you never know when you will need to do that. I once again would like to recommend to have a look at the blog posts that I sent in the beginning of the session. So the one that is called Mesh Creation Tips for Vertex Placement. Oh, there's a dog. Then there's the Mesh Weights Workflows, the Planning Ahead, and there's more tips in there. But most of the tips were basically covered today. So today we have seen the basics, we have seen how to create good starting meshes. As you see, meshes do not need to be complicated to work. Let's actually have them wobble while I speak. Okay, so they are doing stuff. I could also have the butterfly do stuff. The next step would be to also see these on more complex, more 3D meshes. For that, once again, I would recommend to have a look at the stream where I explain this on the gifts, and then I show this in multiple streams. I usually explain the logic with every example that I show. I think that in one of the next streams, I'm going to do something a bit more advanced, like doing a face rig, because it was requested many times. And the last time that I did a realistic face rig was when I had a sore throat. Maybe you remember that. For other example of meshes, there's tons of streams that you can have a look at. Thank you for keeping me company and asking all of these wonderful questions during the entirety of the stream. I really appreciated that. Once again, all of the material will be available for download in the description of the video, and I will see you again next Tuesday. Thank you and bye bye!